6 years at Google. Before that, Department of Homeland Security. Before that, you were Director of Critical Infrastructure, Cybersecurity at the White House. Before that, more time at Homeland Security. Before that, the U.S. Army. We're going to talk a little bit about your background later and the culture that you're trying to build at Google Cloud. But I want to start with a story, something that happened from some cybersecurity perspective, a hacking or an outage. And you were just like, it happened and you were just like, okay, this is bad.
Yeah, I think, well, more recent. I'll start with some recent ones, and then we can always.
It can be top secret too.
Oh.
You can feel free to break some news here.
I will not break news. You know, I think, well, probably one of the most challenging ones that I dealt with was actually quite a while ago in the government, which was the Office of Personnel Management, and where over a series of time we eventually discovered that some other country had taken millions of some very sensitive documents and fingerprinting, so what government employees use to apply for their security clearances. And they had taken millions of those documents. And it was one of those things that sort of unfolded like a car accident where the news just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I think, and the important thing that I also want to highlight for this is sometimes a lesson that people take away from these things is, well, you just should not try to find out the bad things, because that's what happened is as you were and as we were sort of improving the security and improving the detection is when you started to find the bad things. And so, you know, long story in terms of how different people were held accountable that I have opinions about, but you know, in the end, it was organizations dealing with, what did it say when we call it legacy software and legacy infrastructure? It just means old. And so, you know, the government dealing with some of the oldest infrastructure. And so an organization that was trying to do the right thing, that was doing the right thing, and rolling out better detection, rolling out better capabilities, and finding out some, you know, more and more horrific of what was lost, and eventually having to go public and deal with it. And so I think that one has always stuck with me. Precisely for that reason, because in the end, you know, as most security professionals will know, it's the security team that gets held accountable when something happens, which is a whole issue. Yes, it's true, the security leaders need to be held accountable, the ultimate owners of an agency or business need to be held accountable, but to disincentivize the very sort of security work that allows you to have that observability and to be able to see what is actually happening is a trend that is concerning. And so that was probably my most oh, this is really happening. There's a few of those, but that one really stuck with me because of the accountability, the deep desire for the people to hold people accountable that ended up leading to people reconsidering whether they should be investing as much in security because it went badly.
So we're gonna come back to, just in the last couple of minutes, your time in government. But before we do that, I want to hit on a little bit of what you're doing at Google Cloud and just set up the context for us. I mean, everybody here is familiar with Google Cloud and the products and services it offers, but I mean, in the context of what you do, billions of users, millions of websites globally, what's the biggest misunderstanding that people have about the scale and complexity and what it takes to actually keep this thing up and running?
I don't know if it's a misunderstanding or just it's sort of hard to contemplate. And so, for example, we have billions of users, and I'll touch on all of Google, that interact with all of our various services. We have services deployed in over 200 countries. In order to do that, we have 7.75 million miles of cable, subsea and terrestrial, just to support that alone, let alone all of the energy and all the other infrastructure that goes into that. We process over 20 petabytes of data every single day. It's hard to, these numbers are so big, it's almost hard to contemplate. So I was looking, so that's an equivalent of 2 million gigabytes a minute.
Wow.
It wasn't even until I came to Google that I was oh wow, this is enormous. And then, of course, it's our responsibility to figure out how to protect all of that. If you think of, we were talking about phishing resistance earlier, which we have invested a lot in. Gmail alone automatically blocks 120 million phishing attempts every day. Like, that's awesome.
Still get through.
No. We're pretty good at it.
Okay. I have this really persistent one that I'll talk to you about later. They keep changing it. It's really annoying.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of that. Just thinking about the scale of the network and the infrastructure that was built to support, what we now call Workspace and Gmail and YouTube and all of these things, and now we offer as cloud. It's immense. It's mind-boggling to the extent that they were able to engineer something that works like this with low latency and low cost. It's just...
Well, and the thing that just occurred to me is when they were building this out, like when Gmail became available to us, I think, as consumers of a certain age, like around 40, you're like, wait a second, we can have free email that has unlimited storage. But a lot of us have that same email address that we've had for close to 20 years at this point. The threats against that have evolved so much over that period of time. So it wasn't like, that product or any Google product or any Google Cloud product was built when it was first built with what could be attempted right now in mind. So how do you, it's not like, you're not like backfilling, but how do you make sure that the legacy services are actually protected?
Well, we don't think in terms of legacy in that way. So one of the things that attracted me to come to Google was the scale and impact that you can have with that sort of reach. And the second thing was their continued recognition of the importance of security and reliability. And building that into the culture. And investing in those things and recognizing that you can, and in many cases they innovated, and I'm saying they because I wasn't there when this happened, so I can't claim credit for it. But thinking about how do you deliver high quality services at a global scale with low latency and low cost, but be able to continue to ensure on a regular basis that security and reliability is embedded in everything that you do. And so a lot of times you'll hear people talk about how you have to trade off speed for security or speed for reliability, and I don't think that's true. It does mean that you have to change the way that an organization prioritizes and invests, and it's not something that you can just sort of do it once. You have to continually invest in that, and you have to think about the incentives in your organization, and that's one of the things that I think Google has done really well, and not just doing it for themselves, being able to then externalize that through various mechanisms.
So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of threats and attacks and agentic AI, for example. And this has been brought up a couple times, but the recent example about a month ago with Anthropic, the company said they disrupted a highly sophisticated AI-led espionage campaign that used their Claude tool. Here's what Anthropic said: the attackers used AI's agentic capabilities to an unprecedented degree, using AI not just as an advisor, but to execute the cyber attack themselves. Was this like a crossing of the Rubicon?
I'd probably future folks can say whether that was it. I guess what I would say is generally, I think of AI, or where we're at with AI right now, in generative AI, as an inflection point for security, for sure. And a lot of people have talked about it already, so maybe won't rehash some of those things. But the idea that the advantage could get to the defender, I think is a real thing. Now, is it also going to the offense? Of course. But when you think of security in the amount of noise that is generated in security, and what AI is good at, right, is being able to distill that signal from that noise. And previous panelists talked about, being able to have analysts that can focus on those higher level tasks and using agents to filter out all of that signal and noise. Of course, that doesn't mean it's easy to do right. But I do think it's that moment, if we can harness it as a community. It's not just individual companies, but harnessing it as a community. And we're doing a lot of work in that space. But yes, for sure. Whether that was, what happened with Claude is Rubicon. I think there's a lot of things that are going on. And I do think is the community going to come together to embrace what is available or potentially available, and be able to leverage that for good against those who would leverage it for bad.
Who has the advantage right now?
Well, I always think the offense has the advantage. But, I come from Wisconsin where we believe in a strong defense. And we do win championships every now and then with a good defense. I see scenarios where it's changing, right? Where you see, AI-powered security capabilities, whatever domain, security operations, right? Where they are able to both detect, process, and mitigate issues. And at the rate, billions of these. And so it's, again, the scale is mind-boggling. But that we have to do it right. We have to do it in a way that's explainable, and we have to do it in a way that's standardized, and that is open for all. And so when we're making decisions, or the agents are making decisions on our behalf, they're being guided properly, and in a way that is generally accepted and understood by the community.
I promised we'd come back to your time in public service, and I think it's fair to say your entire career up until 2020, when you started working at Google, was in the public sector. White House, DHS, Army. You probably work around a lot of people who've never worked in the public sector and have worked in tech their whole lives. Culturally, what do you bring, and what do they bring to you?
I think, well, in one way, I remember all the time in government, everybody would come to me and say, oh, the private sector is so much more efficient, and you guys are so slow. And I was like, that's not like totally true, guys.
You actually have the experience.
Yeah, the private sector is not some like magical land where everything like happens instantaneously and there's no bureaucracy. That was sort of shocking for me. And that's fine. Bureaucracy is good to some extent. But I think, some of the things that I bring is, I would say for Google, this is maybe a little bit more unique to Google. Google is very engineering first company, right? And in thinking about how do you design a solution that, that scales, that makes, humans' life easier, ideally trying to engineer humans out of the process as much as possible. And, but I will say sometimes that means that we tend to look at everything through that lens. And so I think a lot of times what I bring is, one, a deeper understanding of governments and where regulators and governments might be coming from and their thinking of risk and the risk that they're trying to manage and how they see different companies working together. And then also bringing there's ways to bring stakeholders together. And then combining that with a strong desire and capability for engineers to be able to, okay, how can I engineer better solutions? I think it comes to a really unique sort of set of outcomes when we can do that together.
So I'm going to break the rules here because we're going to run out of time. But I have to ask you, because of your time in government, because of what you did in the Army, what you saw in the White House, what, from a cybersecurity perspective, keeps you up at night?
I think I'm going to say it's a mix between cybersecurity and reliability, because I think a lot of the most impactful things may not necessarily be from a malicious perspective, as was talked about earlier. And I think the thing that keeps me up at night the most is we're now dealing with such a complex ecosystem in so many different players and so many different dependencies, right? And that there's a dependency somewhere in the system. You could take that either technical or just relationship that is not understood well enough, and you have these cascading consequences. And I'm thinking a little bit broader than just our company. This is like one of the most common things that happens with these big outages.
I mean, I was thinking about it from like a national security perspective.
Yeah, so where you have, so one of the things I did in Homeland Security was work on something that we called national critical functions. And so it's what are those functions that the country, that the U.S. in particular needs in order to function. And many of those are based on trust. And they're based off of a oftentimes unknown set of participants. Some are well known, some are not, and a lot of dependencies within those systems. And that's changing a lot, which I think is, from a technology perspective, you have different people in the market providing those services. And that's what I mean is one of those dependencies, the reliability of the financial system, the reliability of markets, and whether that's an actor maliciously exploiting those or through some unintentional scenario, and bringing those down, and especially in a low trust environment where people then are now getting into a scenario where I cannot trust the financial system or I cannot trust for the delivery of my electricity. And you combine those two things, and where an actor, a malicious actor, could even exploit something they had nothing to do with, but they can create a perception that something happened. Those are the nightmare scenarios to me.
I can't end on that because you said nightmare. What will help us sleep tonight? What prevents you? like that all sounds pretty bad. And I read the headline about the CME last week, and we saw what happened with one accidental thing. What gives you confidence that we're not going to enter a scenario like this?
Because, well, everything that we've talked about all day, right? All you heard is all the different companies, whether those are cloud providers, financial institutions, telco institutions, tech companies. People are aware of this, right? And they're working together. So I know, Google and tons of different companies that are part of this. We've put out things like Secure AI Framework and investing together, Amazon, Google, PayPal, Microsoft. People are investing in solutions and are recognizing this and working together. And it's going beyond information sharing. People are investing actual dollars into these things to improve the ecosystem. That's how I feel better at night. And I also know we have a lot of people who are working every day to make sure. And I do think we're very resilient as individual companies and as a country. So far. And so we just need to keep ensuring that we are open, transparent, and continue to work together. It sounds a little bit lame, but in the end, that is what it is we have to responsibility as providers in these ecosystems, as providers of critical functions, wherever you are in that value chain, we have a responsibility to be regularly engaged and regularly improving. And I think people are doing that.
Okay, I think we can end there.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Jeanette Manfra, Vice President, Global Risk and Compliance over at Google Cloud. Go ahead.